I'm about to try and do something that should not be possible. Try and set a lap time that is in the top 1% in the world in time trial mode on the new F1 game on a controller. Can I really do this? Well, I'm voice recording this before I've even driven a lap yet, and I'm expecting this to take me days of driving hundreds of laps to try and complete this potentially impossible challenge. So of course, for my first lap, it wasn't going to be anywhere near the level that I'd be operating at by the end of this video, but trust me, you want to stay around and watch every single improvement that I make. To be fair, for my standards, this first lap wasn't actually that bad, but honestly, I was just so rusty because I hadn't driven on the F1 game for about a week and a half at this point. So obviously, I'm not going to waste your time, and we're going to go through this first lap very quickly, and now we're coming up to the line, and this lap put me into the top 61% in the world. And straight away after this, I made 4 very quick improvements, and I finally felt like I was getting back into the rhythm of driving again. So these improvements put me into the top 49% in the world, which I was very grateful for, but I knew that there was so much time to find in every single one of the corners on the lap. And I knew that all I had to do was just keep driving, because this is my best track on the calendar by an absolute mile. It's now time for my first massive improvement in this challenge, and I thought I'd take you through the whole lap just so you get an idea of how I was driving at this point. And as you just saw, going through turn 1, I had a really clean run, and I was now 1.75 tenths up with time to find in turn 3. So going through this corner once again, I had a very clean run, and I gained around a tenth and a half, but to be honest, there was some time left on the table because I took such a tight exit, and this definitely cost me some minimum speed. Next up was turn 4, and I didn't find any time through there, so I knew that I'd have to focus on that one for future improvements. Turn 5's flat out, but after this, I knew that there was time to find in every single corner. Going through turn 6, I gained around a tenth of a second, and up next was turn 7, where I found around half a tenth, and this was massive. And even though at this point in the challenge a tenth and a half might not seem like much, this is such a short track, and every millisecond counts. It's now time for the final 2 corners, and I knew that there was loads of time to find, specifically in the final corner. So going through this double right-hander, I just seemed to nail it, especially in the final corner where I found 3 tenths off one corner alone. This lap gained me exactly 20% in terms of the leaderboard, which put me into the top 29% in the world, which as you can see, I was absolutely buzzing with. So on the last lap, I mentioned that I knew that there was time to find on the exit of turn 3, and we're coming up to that corner already a tenth up. And to be honest, I just did exactly what I knew I had to do to make an improvement, and I was now a quarter of a second up. And I maintained this gain till the end of the lap, which brought me 2.5 seconds within the world record, and I was now into the top 24% in the world, which was a massive jump for such a small improvement. And a few failed laps later, I was coming into the final double right-hander 800ths of a second up. Going through turn 9, I doubled my gain to the delta, and then it was time for the final corner where I found an entire tenth, and in the end, this lap put me into the top 21% in the world. And although I was very happy with this, I wanted to keep building on this momentum, and going through turn 1, I found over a tenth and a half from just one corner. So I decided to keep driving, but we're going to go through most of the first and second sector because I didn't improve on this gain from turn 1 until turn 6. So now it is time for turn 6, and I know the exact reason why I found time in these 2 corners, obviously along with turn 7, and it was because for the first time in this challenge I didn't brake going through them. This meant that I carried so much higher minimum speed, and leaving these 2 corners I would be just under 3 tenths up coming into the double right-hander. Going through turn 9, I made an improvement because I used so much more of the track. However, I lost all of this improvement by not taking the final corner as well. However, on this lap I still made a quarter of a second improvement, which as we know is absolutely massive. And I didn't know this yet, but as you can see, we're going into the garage here, and this lap put me into the top 13% in the world. And of course I was delighted, but I also knew that this lap would be very difficult to beat. And well, yeah, as I predicted, I just really struggled to make any improvements on this lap, and I just seemed to be making mistake after mistake after mistake. And to be honest, out of all the corners on this track, it was the first one that was causing me the most problems. Every single time I went through turn 1, I just felt like I was making a mistake, either on traction, just carrying too much minimum speed, or just flat out corner cutting. But if I'm real with you, I didn't really let this affect me, as I knew that once I started to nail turn 1 once again, I would really start to kick on and make even more big improvements. And then a load of failed attempts later, I didn't know that I was coming onto what would be a brilliant lap. So of course, first up was turn 1, and this went really well. I took it really cleanly and tried to follow the world record holder's line, which unsurprisingly did actually work, and I gained around half a tenth. So it was now time for turn 3, and to be honest, I didn't actually think that I'd find any time through here, but this time, I mean, I used all of the track, and I gained another half a tenth, which was massive. And after this, of course, was turn 4, and you can really see why I was gaining so much time at this point, and it was that I was following Otis Lawrence's line religiously. On the exit of turn 4, I gained around 400ths of a second, and then going through the flat out turn 5, somehow I made another 200ths worth of improvement. Next up was turn 6, and sadly I lost all of the progress that I'd made in turn 4 and 5, and I was now only a tenth up, which I maintained going through turn 7. And now it was time for the final double right-hander, and to be honest, just like turn 3, I didn't think that there was any time to find in these. However, just like turn 2, I did actually manage to find time through these, specifically the final corner, and I finished this lap with comfortably over 2 tenths worth of improvement. This lap put me into the top 7% in the world, and it was where I realised that this challenge was definitely possible. And not long after this, I was coming off an invalidated lap that would have been even even more progress, but I really wanted to build on this momentum. So going through turn 1, I carried a really high minimum speed and I gained around a tenth, which was huge. Right, so we're quickly going to speed up to turn 4 here, because going through turn 2 and 3, I didn't gain or lose any time, which was absolutely fine by me. On my previous personal best, I had a poor run through turn 4, but luckily for me, this time I didn't, and I gained a full tenth by the time we got to turn 6. So going through turn 6, to be honest, looking back, I've got no idea how I gained any time going through there, but now I was comfortably over 2 tenths up. After this, of course, was turn 7, and once again, I somehow gained even more time, and at this point, I knew that I could potentially be on a massive improvement. Next up was turn 9, and going through this corner, I made even more progress by carrying higher minimum speed, and luckily for me, going through the final corner, I didn't bottle it, and I made comfortably over 3 tenths worth of progress on this lap. So this lap put me into the top 4% in the world, and I now knew that I was so close to completing this challenge. However, I was also starting to realise how difficult this challenge was going to be, because I had to find every single millisecond possible. And not long after this, I was coming into the final 2 corners almost a tenth up. However, through turn 9, I absolutely bottled it, and now it was time for turn 10, and I thought that I was about to not make an improvement. Thankfully though, I did make a very minor improvement, and this kept me in the top 4% in the world, but progress is progress. And a few laps later, I didn't know that I was just about to start an unbelievable lap. So this lap already started really well, because on the way up to turn 1, I was already 200ths up, and then I had a really good run through turn 1, and it was just so clean. I didn't make any mistake whatsoever, and I was already 700ths up coming into turn 3. Sadly though, going through turn 3, I just got on the power way too early, and this led to me making a mistake on traction, and now I was actually down to my delta, which was definitely not ideal. So we're actually going to skip all the way up to turn 9 here, because through the rest of the corners I didn't make any progress, but I'm not complaining, because I was still marginally up to my delta by the time we got to the final 2 corners. So coming into turn 9, I just knew that I had to absolutely send it, and that's exactly what I did. I was a tenth up leaving turn 9, and going through the final corner, I carried so much minimum speed, and I was now 1.8 tenths up. For a second, I actually thought that this was going to be the lap to complete the challenge, but sadly it was not. I was now in the top 2% in the world, under a second away from the world record, and in the top 1,000 players in the world. And although there were still corners such as turn 3 where I knew that there was time to find, I knew that this challenge was going to be extremely difficult to complete, because this lap was pretty much perfect. So after this lap, as you can imagine, I was pretty happy with my progress, and I decided that that was enough driving for the day. And now we're on to day 2 of me trying to complete this challenge, and I just could not beat my best lap. It turns out that on my previous lap, I absolutely nailed turn 4, and going through here, on basically every time I tried to improve on it, I was just making mistake after mistake after mistake, and costing myself so much time. And because I had such a good run through the final 2 corners on my previous personal best, I just could not make any progress through here, which really gets in your head. So imagine you're coming into these final 2 corners 2.5 tenths up, which is exactly what you need to complete this challenge, but you need to nail it, and you just can never do it because you're so in your own head about it. That is pretty much exactly what I was going through. So probably after about 2 hours of just making mistakes, I knew that it was time to switch something up. And when I was going through the PlayStation version of the leaderboard, I noticed that pretty much everyone in the top 10 was using a realistic performance McLaren. So obviously I didn't think that this was a coincidence, and I messaged my thumbnail designer, who by the way makes some brilliant F1 game videos, and I've left a link to him in the description, and he told me that the McLaren is around 1 to 2 tenths faster per track. And as you can probably imagine, I was going to take complete advantage of this new information. And as you can see, after only 8 laps of driving this McLaren, I was coming into turn 3 a quarter of a tenth down. However, I knew that there was time to find. So going through the corner, I tried to stay as close to the world record holder's line as possible, and this worked out perfectly, because by the time we got on the straight up to turn 4, I was a tenth up. Moving on, as you can see in the background, we're skipping all the way up to turn 9, because from turn 4 to the double right-hander, I didn't make any progress. In fact, I actually lost time, and coming into these final 2 corners, I was only 7/100ths up. In the past, these 2 corners had proved difficult for me, so I knew that I had to absolutely nail them, and that's pretty much exactly what I did. Leaving the final 2 corners, I had only lost 2/100ths of a second from those 2 corners, which wasn't too bad, and I was still in the top 2% in the world though. So as we speed up to the garage and therefore the leaderboard, I wanted to go and have a look at what was required of me to set an exactly top 1% lap time. Currently, 53,328 players had set a lap time, and the driver that was in 533rd position had set a lap time exactly a tenth faster. I now knew what I had to do, it was just whether or not I actually had the ability to set a lap time this fast.
this is it. This is the lap of the weekend.
I had done it. In the end, I scraped into the top 1% in the world by 9,000ths of a second. So I'm not going to lie to you, this lap was far from perfect. I mean, I was a 100ths of a second down coming into turn 6, yet I managed to improve by comfortably over a 10th. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and if you can please subscribe, because I'm trying to hit 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we're getting so close, and I definitely think it's possible. And if you have any video ideas, please put them in the comments below.